Dudes, it's Memorial Day 2018, and this is going to be a special story honoring my father in World War II and honoring all the men and women who have lost their lives defending the United States of America in combat. This is Act My Age, Lessons from a Guy Who's Old Enough to Know Better. I'm Brother Russ, and today we're going to depart my normal format, and instead I'm going to honor my father on this Memorial Day 2018 here in the USA. Now, Memorial Day is for the people who have fought in wars defending the country and lost their lives. Thankfully, my father did not lose his life in World War II, or I would not be here. But he did tell us some stories when he got home after we were born, and he's gone now. Most of his generation are gone, and even those who were their children are now aging and disappearing. And a lot of these stories, I'm afraid, are being lost. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes today telling one of the stories that I remember he told. Now, obviously, it's been years, and my recollection may be a bit foggy and so forth, so give me that much leeway. There may be a couple small errors, but I think it's pretty well true to form from what I remember. My father was a bomber pilot in the U.S. Army Air Corps, and in World War II, the worst position you could have in the military was to be assigned to a submarine. They had the greatest mortality rate, and the second highest was to be assigned to a bomber. And my father was a bomber pilot. He actually served 2 terms as a bomber pilot, which was pretty well unheard of for most people because, frankly, most of them didn't last that long, and the ones that did last that long wanted out. He was very proud of the fact throughout his life that none of his men ever died on a mission that he led. This is a story of a time that a plane got shot out from under them. From what I recall, I think he said he had 3 planes shot out from under them during the course of the war, and this was one. They had gone on a nighttime raid over Germany, and had been bombing. They came back. They had been shot up very, very badly. Apparently, there were engines out. The radio was out. Navigation systems were out. There was basically nothing. They were running in the dark with lights on, no communication, and barely holding the plane together enough to stay flying. And by the time they came back from Europe and crossed into the English countryside, a question arose in the crew as to whether or not they should try to put it down somewhere and then try to contact the base, or to try to lumber it back to the base. And finally, my father, being the commander on the plane, said, "Listen, I'm going to put this thing down." And he knew very well that when he put it down, they would never get back up again because it was a total flying wreck. And so they found a field, as I recall. He said it was looked like it was an abandoned either glider field or a crop duster field, something like this, something for a much smaller aircraft. And by the grace of God, they were able to put the thing down without losing anyone. And then they went off into the English countryside and finally found a telephone to call the base to say where they were and that they would need someone to come and pick them up because this plane was not getting off the ground again. And he said that he called the tower and immediately got this voice saying, "Can't talk now, stay where you are, call back in the morning." Hung up. Turns out, as he found out the next day, they hunkered down in a barn or something like this, as I recall. They called back and find out that the base was under a German air raid at that time, and that's why they couldn't talk. And they had come in with lots of fighters and were really tearing up the place. So if they had lumbered on inside a plane with no communication, a plane with no weaponry to speak of, and it was barely staying in the air, they would have instantly been shot out of the sky, because they're running full lights on as well, which means that they're just a giant glowing target in the sky. They would have been shot out of the sky, and more than likely, most, if not everyone, would have died. So he said that the air base finally, after they were cleaning up their own mess, finally sends a carrier out, a troop carrier, to come pick them up, jeeps or something of the sort. And his crew came to him and said, listen, anytime that you feel like you want to put this thing down, you go right ahead. We are with you. And it was one of those things that, I'm not trying to celebrate war. War is a terrible thing, but sometimes wars have to be fought. And sometimes the men and the women who fight in that war end up giving their very lives. And my father and his entire crew could have given their lives that night, and no one would have known this story. But thankfully, he survived long enough that he could pass the story on. And I just wanted this story to be remembered, because there's probably many, many more people who died in that particular night, who certainly died in World War II, died in other wars, whose stories are not recalled because no one ever heard them, because the people who could tell them are no longer here. So I just want to honor my father, and I want to honor all of those veterans who gave their lives to the country for the sake of the country, allowed us to be free, and say thank you to all of you, and thank you, Dad. I miss you too. See you next time.